Everybody keeps talking about the next generation. Oh, the next. You know what? How about you go out and help the next generation? Why don't you put your money where your mouth is? Run for local office. There's so many things you can do. Instead of complaining about society, go out there and be the change.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world? I'd like to welcome you back to the Real Talk with Zuby podcast. On today's episode, we have got on a friend of mine. I have known this man in some capacity for the best part of 2 decades. I've been aware of him for a long time, following his stuff from bodybuilding.com to all of the supplement stuff, all of the bodybuilding stuff. And yeah, he's a man of many talents. He's a man of many words. And this is Marc Lobliner.
Thank you for having me, man. Man, you brought it back to like 2002.
Yep.
Like that's how far back it goes.
Yep.
It's crazy how the world's kind of collided, right? Like I went from fitness, kind of ventured in after 2020 into some political stuff. I didn't really want to. It just felt like I had something to say and I said it. And then you became the strongest female in the world.
At least in Britain.
Yeah, at least it's a small place, but hey, you're the best. You're the best there.
Thank you.
And it's amazing how they intersected, and here we are today.
Yeah, dude. I think I'll tell you something that you'll not know this because you had no clue. You know, you used to way back on bodybuilding.com, you had like a cutting log.
Yes.
When you were leaning down.
That was how we started the company.
Yes. Yeah. And I want to say, gosh, I don't know how old I would have been at the time, maybe late teens or early 20s. And I remember following that blog and using it as a guideline for my own cutting when I was leaning down. And I wanted to know how to do the diet and how to structure it and do my training. And I found this guy called Marc Lobliner on this website.
That is nuts.
And you were posting the progress photos and everything like that. You must have been in your...
I was in my early 20s. Early to mid 20s.
I guess I was a teenager.
Yeah, I started Scivation when I was 24. And in
Scivation
2004.
Extend, right?
Yeah,
the
intra-workout. Yep,
I remember.
And we created that intra-workout category. I would say that's still probably my biggest imprint is to create there's only like, 5-6 categories, pre-workout, intra-workout, post-workout, protein bars, etc. But to say that you pioneered an entire category, that's pretty cool. So that's the thing I'm most proud of in the industry is actually before we came out with that product, you either had water or Gatorade. And we're like, wait a second, what about amino acids? Then we funded the study in 2009 and it was off to the races from there. So that was but man, it's crazy because I started vlogging and competing because we couldn't sell product. We didn't have social media back then. We didn't have YouTube. Facebook was colleges at that time. It was just universities. It started really hitting off in like 2007.
Yeah, 2004 I joined Facebook.
Yeah, and it was small. Nobody cared. And we were just like, hey, what if I cut and do a bodybuilding show, which I'd never done before. And I did it and our sales increased slightly, but they increased. Well, let me do another show. And then I started competing. So I started competing in bodybuilding simply for marketing. It wasn't because I saw Rocky.
How old were you at that time?
So I think it was 2007.
Okay.
I did my first show.
Today's episode is brought to you by BitBox. As I'm sure you've noticed by now, inflation is a major issue. The more money that central banks print, the less your dollars, pounds, and euros are worth. When it comes to government-issued fiat currency, inflation is inevitable. That's why for many years, I've been saving in Bitcoin. It's scarcer than gold, and it cannot be inflated by any central bank. But if you're going to buy and hold Bitcoin, it's vital that you store it securely, because leaving your coins on exchanges is risky and leaves them vulnerable to potential hacks. That's where today's sponsor, BitBox, comes in. BitBox is a Swiss-made hardware wallet that allows you to store your Bitcoin easily and safely. It only takes a few minutes to set up a wallet and take full custody of your coins the same way I do. Secure your Bitcoin today with a BitBox. Go to bitbox.swiss/Zuby to get 5% off a hardware wallet today. That's bitbox.swiss/Zuby for 5% off. As I said, you've been on my radar for, about half my life.
So you can credit me with becoming the strongest woman in the world.
Well, I can say you certainly played some role in it. But man, I think that's one of the craziest things about the time that we live in this internet age is just how, regardless of geography, regardless of borders, sector, age, whatever it is, you can just be connected to everybody. There's people I've been meeting in the past couple of years, and I'm like, man, I've like been aware of this person for 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And now here we are meeting in the real world for the first time. Like I met Jordan Peterson just on Monday.
Yeah.
You know, I've been following him since 2016, and we've had interactions online and stuff like that. But it was just, we both saw each other and we're like, finally, like, you know.
It's like you've known the person.
Exactly.
It's like it's not your first time meeting them.
Yeah.
Because you've had all these interactions, and a lot of people I'll meet be like, man, it's like you're the same in person. One thing is I don't put on a front.
Yep.
Like me online is me in person. I'm really like this, which is scary. and it's my wife and I, we've been together 27 years, September 30th.
Amazing.
So we've been high school sweethearts, but people will be like, man, I saw my daughter just went to college. You wouldn't imagine how many DMs I got, man. I remember watching her when she was in a stroller. And so I put my life on the internet, and people say that's dangerous, that's good and bad. For me, it's been a net positive. Very few negative issues, nothing in person. So despite people who, believe it or not, I used to get death threats just for people disagreeing with my diet strategies.
Of course. Oh, I believe it.
And it's insane, but never once in person has that happened.
Yep.
And that's the beauty of it, is that the trolls don't really leave their houses.
I think a lot of them don't exist.
No.
I think a lot of them don't exist, and those who do, yeah, either they don't leave their houses, and or they're cowards, and or they're not really that serious. They're just messing around and trying to get under people's skin.
I think it's trolling. I think it gives them. So think about what social media does. So Mark Cuban's worth how many billions?
A lot.
And people are like, you're stupid. I'm like, no such thing as a stupid billionaire.
Yeah.
Like you might lack in some areas of life, but you look at, have you ever read the book Relentless, From Good to Great to Unstoppable?
No, I haven't.
By Grover. I recommend everybody reads it. So if you look at the greats, Jordan, Kobe, all these guys, they really sucked at their personal life, right? Their personal life's a mess. Kobe, you can make an argument, but he had that issue with the girl in Colorado. Course, yeah. So the thing is, they're so good at one thing. They put all the focus on that they really don't have the mind span to be good at anything else, right? So when you look at someone who's great at one thing and they're not so great at another thing, that doesn't mean they're stupid. That just means that their gifts and all their energy is put towards becoming great at something. And I could almost say that every great in any sport has sacrificed something. They've sacrificed family, they've sacrificed their personal lives. Because think about all the time you have training. You go from the intellectual side as well. Like, oh, Cuban, maybe he just has a different view on how the society should work.
Yeah.
Or here's another option. Maybe he's just having fun trolling people on Twitter.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many things, but I love when people are like, oh, I disagree with him. He's stupid. He's clueless.
Yeah, well, that in itself is a sign of stupidity.
Yes.
And a sign of lack of empathy. If you think the only reason someone may have a different viewpoint than you, this could be political, social, cultural, religious, anything. If your worldview is just that everyone who disagrees with me is stupid and or uninformed, then that's a sign of, extreme arrogance, extreme pride, and also just complete lack of empathy and stupidity on your own part. If you can't, I have my own beliefs, but outside of perhaps the most completely insane beliefs that may exist out there, I don't find it particularly difficult to understand why other people have different beliefs, whether that's political. I'm very much I'm a theist. I've believed in God. I've been a Christian my entire life. I don't find it particularly intellectually difficult to understand why someone would look at the world and everything in it and conclude that God does not or cannot exist. That's not my conclusion, but it's not exactly hard for me to understand. It's not hard for me to understand why someone would follow a different faith or a different religion. And even if I was confused by it, it's like, oh, look, there's all these billions of people out there with different viewpoints. Why don't I talk to them and have conversations, and at least, even if we don't agree, we'll understand each other's perspectives. And I've done that, I don't know how many thousands of times throughout my life. And it kind of amazes me that someone can make it into adulthood and has never had that conversation, right? Someone's like, oh, everyone I know is liberal and I don't know any conservatives. Like, so you're 40 years old and you're claiming you've never met a conservative person in 40 years. Firstly, that can't be true. And secondly, that's your bad. Like that's you're isolating yourself so much that you're blinding yourself to the way billions of people across the world think.
That's why censorship is so dangerous. With discussion comes enlightenment. So when you isolate yourself and you only hear one view, you don't get to see the other thing. When you don't discuss, you don't learn why they think that way, what happened, and you're unable to talk about it and perhaps reach either a new conclusion or a hybrid conclusion, right? Like, let's take abortion. I know it's always, every election it comes up. It's crazy, right? So I understand both sides.
Yeah.
I truly do. But let's say one person's staunchly pro-life, one person is staunchly pro-abortion or pro-choice. So and a lot of times there's no middle ground, but sometimes in society you have to make compromises. That's why with the pro-life people, which by the way, I'm pro-life, but I understand the other side. Yes. I understand the bodily autonomy. I understand their thought. I was pro-choice up until my wife had a miscarriage. Because I was like, it's not a baby.
Yeah.
And then you lose a baby and you're like, well, that's not a fetus. That's a baby. I just lost a child. Yeah. So, but I understand both sides. But when you're not talking about it, when you're just calling everybody else Nazis and this and that, you're losing the opportunity to discuss and potentially bring someone on your team or learn something new for yourself. But people are so afraid to admit they're wrong. And we're seeing that about 2020.
Yes.
Right? You're seeing this disconnect with the factual reality where people are still stuck in their bubble of their belief because they refuse to admit that they were wrong. And that's the problem. Pride is a great thing. It can also be a very dangerous thing. And I think we're seeing that right now in society.
Yeah. Well, it's the top of the 7 deadly sins for a reason, because all of the other ones are downstream of it. I think one of the problems with the word pride is actually a limitation of the English language. So in other languages, they have multiple words for pride.
Really?
Yes. And it's a sort of a failure of the English language that there's only one word. In the same way, we only have one word for love. And in other languages, there can be multiple words for it, because the way you love donuts is not the same way you love your wife or love your children. And the way you love your friend is not the same way you love your wife, right? But we use the same word for it all. We just say, oh, love, I love this. I love that movie. I love my child. I love my cat. Right? Like, it shouldn't be the same word. So pride is similar. There's a type of pride that's absolutely positive. If you say, I'm proud to be a father, or I'm proud to be an American, or I'm proud of winning that bodybuilding competition, or I'm proud of what my business has achieved, that is something positive. No one would say, oh, no, that's sinful. You shouldn't be proud of being a father. No, that would be very strange. But there's a type of pride which is arrogance, vanity, thinking you are above other people, looking down on other people. There's a type of pride which means that you don't learn and you're blocked off to all other viewpoints because you don't want to deal with your ego, right? So that's another form of pride. And I'm just thinking it's kind of a shame that it's all the same word, because they all kind of get conflated and people get confused by it.
It's also human nature. We want to belong to a group,
yeah,
right? That's why you see, if the left comes out with an ideology like, oh, we're pro this, boom, everybody's on board. Nobody questions it. No, we're doing this. And the right does the same thing. Both sides do, because humans are very tribal. We want to belong. We want to fit in. We want to be in a group. We don't want to be isolated. We don't want to be alone. But in that, there are people, like I would say you and myself, who are free thinkers, who question, who go against the grain, who go against the narrative. That's a dangerous place to be, because every time you do that, you're susceptible to being attacked by groupthink. So like in 2020, if you immediately said, what's going on? Boom, what'd they do? They censored you, they shut you out, they suppressed you. So that's the danger of it. And that's the danger of censorship. That's the danger of controlling the narrative. The beauty of a free speech society, and I could say America has the First Amendment, which is what makes us special. So the danger of the word misinformation, that's a dangerous word. And the word conspiracy theorist, we should question everything. Like, here's the thing. Well, the election integrity, right? Oh, 2020 was stolen. Audit it. We don't need to audit it. It was completely fair. Well, then audit it. Show it was fair, right? Are we against auditing things now? Is the IRS going to stop auditing American citizens because we said it's true? No, I swear I didn't lie on my returns, but we're going to audit you. No, you don't audit me. You're questioning the integrity of my taxes. Since when did auditing become something the government's against? Why can they audit sovereign citizens when they can't audit their own elections? Everybody should want the election be audited. If I were the Democrats, like, audit it. Yep. It's all good, bro. Nope, we can't audit. Oh, no, it's already done. The statute of limitations is over. We should audit every election. Elections are so important. Every election, every single one, whether it's won by a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, a libertarian, libertarians will never win, but whether it's won by any of those groups, we need to audit everything. Why were they so against auditing the election? Why all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're an election denier? No, I'm an election auditor. I'm an election checker. I'm an election truther, which means that I want to know what really happened. I want to make it hater proof. I want to make everything hater-proof. If I audit that election, it's hater-proof.
Yeah.
And now you can have a group of haters out there, but they're justified haters because you didn't audit the election. Why were the Democrats so against auditing the election?
Today's podcast is sponsored by my book, Strong Advice, Zuby's Guide to Fitness for Everybody. When it comes to health, exercise, and nutrition, there are a huge number of resources available. Some are great, but others, not so much. The problem with a lot of fitness advice is it's unnecessarily complicated. This can leave you feeling even more confused with underwhelming and unsustainable results. Most diets fail, and even when they do work, most people simply regain the weight. Strong Advice is different because the sole goal of the book is to help you and not to confuse you. It's simple enough for beginners, but detailed enough for experienced lifters. No nonsense, just valuable information. Strong Advice has already helped thousands of people to achieve and maintain their fitness goals, and whether your goal is to lose fat, build muscle, or just get in better shape, it can help you too. Visit zubyfitness.com to get $10 off the ebook or audiobook version of Strong Advice. That's zubyfitness.com, and as a loyal podcast listener, you'll automatically get $10 off. Enjoy the rest of the podcast. I know you've been on my pod before, but for listeners who are not actually familiar with who you are, we've given a hint of bodybuilding and starting a company and supplements, but I realized we kind of skipped over a typical intro that I do. So for people who are here like, hey, I like this guy, but who exactly is he? Who is Marc Lobliner?
So I am, number one, I'm a father of three. My daughter just went to college. So
Congrats.
I successfully raised a child, but now I have to pay for college.
Oh, yeah.
They don't tell you about that. They're like, well, you got to raise them. No, it costs more when they go to college.
Yep.
It costs more. So anyway, I have an 18-year-old daughter, a 16-year-old son who's a great, he should win state in wrestling this year. He's phenomenal. 11-year-old son who's a former state champion in wrestling and also plays football. It's football season now.
Oh, yeah.
And I coach his team. So tomorrow's a big game. Really excited about it, and he's really excited because our fullback is not going to be there, so he gets to run the rock tomorrow.
Awesome.
Really excited for him. I've been married to I already went over this, but I've been with my wife since high school. Been together 27 years. Been married 2002 to been married going on, what is that? Like
22?
22. We're going on 23 years of marriage. So I'm one of those high school, in high school, I was the captain of the football team. She was the captain of the cheerleading team, and we just refused to. No one had the balls to break up with each other, so here we are now. And I own multiple businesses. One is tigerfitness.com. It is a nutritional supplement internet retailer. I also own a company called MTS Nutrition. The Outright Bar is one of my bars. I also own a company called Ambrosia. I'm partners alongside Mike Rashid. You'll see him on, if you don't know him, look him up. Yep. Mike Rashid King.
He's been on Real Talk with Zuby as well.
He's the man. He's my guy. I just spent the whole week with him. I would, Mike is the most loyal friend I've ever had. He's amazing. I love that man. I would take a bullet for him, just not in the chest. Naked, it's an old, was that a Naked Gun joke? And then Sean Torbody, who's been, 2007, he and I have been really close friends. And let me see what else. There's a couple other ventures I have going on. I own a youth performance facility in Franklin, Tennessee, which is 20 minutes from here. And that is, we coach athletes, youth athletes. We coach entire football teams, Page High School, Independence, Nolensville Wrestling. We do a lot of things. So we're really excited about what's going on, and coaching is my passion. My goal is one day to sell everything and just coach.
Awesome.
And because that's the future. Now, I'm not out there wearing a MAGA hat, telling kids to vote. I'm just instilling the values of hard work, meritocracy, and they perform.
Yes.
Like Page won last night. They had to move it up because it was supposed to rain tonight. They haven't given up a touchdown all year, 3-0, winning 42-0. We're on the sidelines. That's where I derive my, all of my joy in life outside of family is coaching. So I have an extended family of 1,000+ kids.
Amazing.
It's the most amazing thing. And Coach Bryce, he manages that. He's honestly the most underrated, greatest performance coach I've ever met. His programming's stellar. His ability to connect with the kids, and that's the key. When you coach children or young adults or even NFL guys, you have to be able to connect with them. You have to be able to get that little extra out of them to work that much harder. And by instilling these values in our youth, everybody keeps talking about the next generation. Oh, the next. You know what? How about you go out and help the next generation? Why don't you put your money where your mouth is? Run for local office. There's so many things you can do. Instead of complaining about society, go out there and be the change that you desire.
This is something that adults miss
Yes.
I say adults. I mean, I'm an adult, of course, have been for a while, but older generations, there's this strange disconnect or denial that younger generations are raised and created by older generations.
Yeah.
So it's like if you're complaining about the younger generation, whether they are millennials or Gen Z or Gen Alpha, it's like, well, they weren't brought into the world by nobody, and they didn't learn all of this stuff from nobody. So if they're having issues with their motivation or their mindset or their behavior, whatever the case may be, then you should be sort of looking upwards and saying, well, what's going on with their parents? What's going on in their community?
Yeah.
What's going on? Why isn't the older generation looking after them and raising them? So I think, I don't know, society would be a lot better. I think one thing we're losing, one thing that's massively getting lost in the West, and this isn't amongst all families and all communities, but in many cases, the intergenerational thinking and community is being lost. I sometimes think this is one of the downsides of over-individualism.
Yeah.
Right? People become so isolated that it's just like, okay, this guy's out here on his own. This woman's out here on her own. It's like, well, what about the family? What about the other families in the community? What about the teachers and the mentors and the coaches and all of this? Like most of the world, well, you absolutely need this for basic survival. So it's never been broken apart. Historically, it was always needed. Now it's like you can kind of survive being isolated, but you can't thrive. And certainly in terms of generations, you can't thrive. So that seems to be something that is just declining very much to the detriment of society and culture. And I think that I have a sort of relatively new theory that I'll float to you here. I'm still sort of working this out in my head, so it might not come out perfectly. But you know, there's the law about energy, how energy cannot be created or destroyed, right? It's just converted. I think the same is true of power. I think the same is true of power and of authority. So the amount of power that exists in a world or in a nation or in a community, it's always there, but it just converts in terms of where it lies. And when the individual becomes smaller, then, well, say the family becomes smaller. If power is taken away from the family, it can go to the individual, it can go to the state, to the government, it can go to another type of institution or something, but the power doesn't go away. It just goes somewhere else. And I think part of the reason why the issue of politics has become so much more at the forefront for people and become so much more divided and polarized and aggressive, and people feeling like if their guy or gal does not win, then this is the end of the world, it's the end of the country, they're going to be screwed and so on. I think it's because so much of the power has been outsourced to that. Faith is declining. Fewer people are saying that they believe in God and that God is the highest authority. So instead, where does that power go? It can go to self, in which case we start getting the idol worship of self, and people are quite literally in identifying as whatever they want, inventing new genders, creating all of these strange issues, getting lost in all of this hedonism. Or you get massive statism, right? Okay, the power's gone from, if God isn't the highest authority, then cool, it's the government, it's the president, it's the prime minister, whatever. And I think this is a sort of philosophically what is at play, not just in the US, but in lots of Western countries, where there just seems to be a constant over-obsession with politics, to the point where it's like it's infused in everything. It's in the sports, it's in the entertainment. It's like you can't just go watch a movie. It's just like everything has to be political. Guys like yourself and myself, like we're not political guys per se.
No.
But it's become just such a hotbed that even people who aren't inclined to be pulled into it, it's just permeating everything. So it's kind of drawing in people from everywhere, and you kind of have to give it energy even if you don't explicitly want to. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, you're old enough to remember when nobody asked who you voted for. You were just friends with people. You'd be hanging out with a dude at dinner, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, the election's coming up. Who you voting for? McCain. What about you? Obama. Cool. Pass the bread.
Yeah.
Nobody cared. Now it's like, oh, you vote for Trump. I can't talk to you anymore. You're a misogynist. You're a racist.
Nazi.
It's never been to this level. The vitriol has gotten so crazy. But just to go back a little bit, the societal issues is fathers.
Yeah.
I could trace it back to strong men.
For sure.
We need stronger men, men who see the feminist movement weakened all of us.
Yes.
And that was its intention. It weakened the male, where some men are there, but they're just weak. And men who are stronger in the few. You can directly trace single parent households to delinquency, to crime, to less
everything
likely.
Negative. Yeah.
Everything negative. There is no positive outcome from single parent families. Yet in the inner city, what are we at? 20% of families have dual parents.
Something like that.
It's some crazy number. So when I look back, it's because we're creating weak men. Because the man doesn't have a role model. And in turn, if a female doesn't have a strong male role model, she's going to be lost as well. Pull the OnlyFans girls, right? Most of them did not have a good nuclear family. Nuclear family is the cure to society's ills.
Yes.
A good nuclear family with a strong father who works. Not saying the mom can't work. My wife works.
Sure.
But a strong man who works, who provides that example. You don't have to be a millionaire. Just work. Show that hard work ethic, a man who is involved in his child's life. If you don't know how to coach, that's fine. Go to practice. Watch it. Just go there. Be a part of it. Play catch with your kid. Simple things. And honestly, you're not your child's friend. You're not. You're their parent. You can have friendly stuff.
Yeah.
My son and I drove to Virginia Beach, 11 hours, there and back for a national wrestling tournament. We were bros. But at the end of the day, he knows that I'm his father.
Of course.
When my daughter went to college, X is like, oh, you can't set your daughter to college because she's going to get, I'm like, if 18 years of my values are erased by a year in college, I didn't do a good job. And the thing is, we want to, the institutions are being overtaken by liberals. You got to keep them out of college. Okay, how do we even the playing field? We get educated.
Yes.
We take those positions. We put strong men and women who do not believe in the woke ideology in those places. And I have strict rules. My daughter has a 1 strike, you're out rule. I'm paying a lot of money for her to go to the college. She's going to number 3 business school in the country. Okay, that's not cheap. I'm like, I will pay for this. If you drink once, if I find out you took 1 sip of alcohol, you're going back to JUCO. We have a no alcohol policy.
Nice.
Period. So you have to be a parent. You have to set boundaries. Kids, your brain is not formed enough to make rational decisions till your mid-20s.
Yep.
So, okay, if you're on your own, you move out, you're paying your own bills, do what you need to do. As long as it's a contract, I will pay for your school. I will pay for your food. I will pay for your car. And I don't think it's an unfair ask to say you can go to parties. You can go to football games. You could tailgate, have a water bottle in your hand.
Yep.
Okay, we're not playing that game. No good decisions ever came out of drinking. Oh, well, that's not fair to your daughter. Cool, not fair. Life's not fair. She needs to learn that. That is how.
Sounds like a pretty darn good bargain to me.
I think it's a great bargain. I think it's a great bargain.
It is.
I mean, we're paying for school. I've worked my whole life to be able to afford this thing, not take out any loans. She's getting out of college in a surplus.
Exactly.
In a surplus, not a deficit. She's not coming out with $300,000 in student loans. In a surplus. I think it's a fair ask to say, hey, no drinking, no dumb decisions. You're there to get an education first and foremost. But if you could fit in some fun, go ahead.
Yes.
I mean, if she wants to go to an Indiana football game, she's went the last 2, go. Have fun. Be with your friends. So, I mean, it's a fair ask. My kids, we have a 0 alcohol tolerance policy in our family.
I like that. I love that.
None. We have none. We do not allow alcohol in our house.
When did you decide that? Is that from the beginning?
When Cammie was 1.
Okay.
18 years ago.
Nice.
I was like, we're done. We're not having alcohol in our house. We're not going to have it. If you're at a party with alcohol and you need to be there for some social reason, that's fine. Just don't drink. And it's been, how do you know they're not doing it behind your back? I know.
Yeah.
We have our ways. Now, we're not overbearing. We're not like following, but we know. You could tell. I'm a parent.
Yep.
I know what's going on. So, but the problem is parents are so disconnected and they want to be bros and friends. And I'm bros with my kids. I coach all their friends. Like my kids go to my strength and conditioning classes. They're there. Their friends are there. Everybody knows me in the community. So at the end of the day, you have to set those boundaries. And that's the problem. Parents don't set those boundaries. They don't stick to them. And that's where you need a strong male. I'm not saying my wife wouldn't do it, but
the men and women are different, man. I don't know. So many issues in modern society sort of, there's a lot of things going on, but you could even say that a lot of the destruction and the breakdown of the family unit comes downstream of this idea that men and women are essentially interchangeable widgets. and that, you don't need fathers, or men aren't necessary, or women aren't necessary. And the millions and millions of people who on some level have bought into the idea that either one sex is not necessary or that they're both just essentially the same and interchangeable is it's quite unbelievable. It's the most obvious. It's the most obvious binary that may exist in the natural world, and it's existed for thousands upon thousands of years. It's not that it's just okay that exists. It's good. The polarity is important. It's the reason we all exist. If men and women were the same, none of us would exist. We wouldn't be here. Our species would not survive. Not just our species, other animal species. And so it's just so strange how there's this constant rejection and denial of it. I think I know, to kind of give the devil its due, I think I know where it comes from. And I think it's because a lot of modern people think or have thought that if we fully recognize this, then it will lead to, this is the source of some type of patriarchal tyranny, or the source of sexism or misogyny, or banning people from this or blocking people from that, or whatever the case may be. There's this obsession with this word you hear all the time now, equity, equity, equity. I hate equity. And it's just like, equity does not exist in nature.
No, I just did an Instagram on that today. I posted a clip. And basically, I'm pro equality. Yeah. Equity means equal outcomes. Equality means the opportunity for equal outcomes. You get to work the same. And I want to be in the NFL. Yeah. Okay. I would really love to play in the NFL. But I want to be Ray Lewis. I want to be Deion Sanders. I want to be some of the greats of all time. But you know why they're Ray Lewis and Deion Sanders and I'm not? Because they're better than me. They have better genetics. They're just better than me at that sport. Now, I'll run laps around them when it comes to managing a business. I might be better on the bodybuilding stage. We're born with these inherent traits. And they could be genetic. They could be Dr. Jose Antonio, who's the CEO of the ISS and the International Society of Sport Nutrition, in the 90s wrote a book on geographical differences in talent. West Africa versus Eastern Europe. And he was called a racist. His name's Jose. So it's just absurd to look at this. And just going back, having male and female roles. So the last CEO of one of my brands was a female. Phenomenal CEO. Cutthroat, just awesome. Loved her. She went on and did other things, right? Let me tell you, she had 7 kids. Wow. You can't have both worlds. You can be maternal and still be a boss bee in the workplace. There's no reason you can't. My wife is cutthroat. She's amazing. Most talented person I've ever worked with. But she wanted to take some years off to raise our children because that was her maternal calling. That's what she felt was right. And she was right. And by her staying home with the kids, that's the reason I'm so successful. Because I knew that if we don't eat, it's because I failed. So I went and I worked my butt off and I provided for my family. And now I can put them through college. That was my motivation.
I'll tell you another massive psyop as well is, and I always correct people when they say this, right? When people say that stay-at-home mothers don't work.
It's work.
I always make a point to correct people when they say that. When they're saying, and that even says something about just where we are as a society, that when people think of work, they automatically think of job which you are getting paid for, that you are earning a monetary income for. Going to the gym is work. Right? Working on a farm is work, even when you're not directly being paid for it. Work doesn't just mean a job in which you're doing X number of hours and then you're receiving a salary or a paycheck. And it's just bonkers. Someone will be like, so mom of 5, she doesn't work. She stays at home. I'm like, you think a mom of 5 does not work?
Well, if the mom can't raise the kids, you have to hire and pay a babysitter. It's literally a job. It's an occupation. But look, the best way to raise your children is for one of the parents. And hey, if you're new age and the woman's for some reason, look, we're in a situation, we had Cammie, which was my first daughter. My wife was making more money than me. I just started a business. My wife was making great money. And she's like, all right, it's on you. Figure this out. I'm like, I'm like, are you sure? We get a babysitter. You're crushing it. Her trajectory was going to be better than mine. But again, that was her belief. And I was actually against my wife staying home with the kids.
Okay, interesting.
I was like, well, keep in mind, my mom is first generation. I'm a first generation American, so she moved here.
From where?
Israel.
Israel, okay.
So my mom served in the IDF, crazy, but she was a bra burner when she moved here. She was all women's rights, this and that. So I was raised like abortion's great.
Oh gosh.
And women, and my mom was, even though my dad was a great provider, my dad worked his butt off. My mom was a soldier. My dad was not the ruler of the house.
Okay.
I had the direct opposite.
Okay.
My dad was a punk. He was just punked around. So I had this, even though I was a strong man, football player, captain of the football team, whatever, I always had this vision that women are 100% equal. And if a woman quits her job, that she's kind of just like giving up. And
so you swallowed the feminist pill on that one,
dude. I was raised in California, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, and here's the thing: I greatly respect women. I love women. I mean, I'm the biggest feminist there is. That's why this whole dudes and women sports thing hit me so hard, because I saw my daughter train her whole life. My daughter didn't have a life in high school.
Sure.
No matter what I'd say, I'm like, stop training. She would train 5 hours a day, state champion soccer player, just phenomenal. In college, she's like, I'm good.
Yeah.
I scratched the itch. There's no professional trajectory. I'm going to just focus on school. And also, she can go to a better school, because the colleges she could have gone to and played soccer and gotten great financial aid, they were not as good academically. So I understand that's a better decision. For me, it broke my heart, because I really love watching her play.
Yeah.
This is my first year not seeing my daughter play.
Yeah.
So, but when she's making big money, I'm like, okay, I'm not sending my daughter to school to just be a stay-at-home mom.
Sure.
She can still work, but I think we have to realize there's nothing wrong with doing both. You can be a maternal caregiver, and there's a different way. Like, my kids fall down, get a scratch, I'm like, rub some dirt on it.
Yep.
My wife will go coddle them. Oh, are you okay? I'm like, leave them alone.
Yep.
Making them little biatches, stop.
That's the polarity, man. I see. I have 4 older siblings, and they're all married. I've got 5 nieces, 5 nephews. So I'm not married with my own children yet, but I have seen that dynamic you're describing. Is just standard.
I'm the sports dad.
Yeah, in 1 in 10 couples, sure, it'll be the poles are reversed.
Yeah.
Right.
That was my family.
Yeah, sure. That exists, but I always say that in the West, there's I call it the obsession with exceptions.
Yeah.
There's always the focus on the exceptions, oftentimes at this point to the detriment of the norm.
Yeah.
So there's such a, as soon as you make any type of generalized statement, particularly something about to do with men and women, someone immediately wants to jump to but there are some people, if I say men are taller than women, so someone wants to, I know a girl who's
Except
6'3".
Except for Marc Lobliner.
I know a girl who's really tall. It's like that. The statement doesn't mean every single man is taller than every single woman.
It's a majority statement.
Yes.
And men are stronger than women.
Yes.
And if you take the strongest men versus strongest women, men are way stronger than women. The fastest men versus the fastest women.
I think the average man is stronger than 90s. I can't remember the exact number. The average man is stronger than 90-something%
That's insane.
of women. Right, the average guy, untrained, right? So especially in upper body strength. So I think the average man is stronger than something like 98% of women.
Yeah,
which is that's significant. That's not like stronger than 60% or something. Like that's a very significant
It's definitive.
Thing. Yes.
It is definitive. Now, there are some outliers. There's a girl who trains at our gym in Ohio, the Tiger Fitness gym.
There's girls that are stronger than me.
She squatted 953 pounds.
Of course.
I mean, I'm never touching it. If I even picked it, I couldn't even get it off the pins, dude. And I'm an elite pro bodybuilder, right? Yeah. I'm a mediocre I'm an elite bodybuilder, mediocre pro bodybuilder. But I'm like, holy wow,
that's insane.
But there are outliers. You cannot. It's like looking at LeBron James and saying, guys can do. No, we can't. Again, like I said before with the equity discussion, you can't take your outliers and put it on an entire population.
Yeah.
There's always going to be a crazy outlier.
Yeah.
There's always going to, in every study, the reason they usually kick out the best and the worst is because they're so over here.
Yeah.
So the top 1 or 2, and it depends how large the study, but if they're doing a study on, let's say, 36 individuals, the 36th and the first are usually kicked out.
Yeah.
Because those are usually, because their results are, everybody's like grouped in here, and then these guys will be here. There's always 1 or 2 of them, and then you kick them out, and it makes the study actually make sense, because these guys will skew the results either way.
It's like you got 100 people in a room and you want to, work out what is the average income. And then, Elon Musk walks in the room and now suddenly, the average is everyone's a billionaire, right? And it's like, no, like that doesn't.
I would be literally like poor. They'd be like, that guy needs to do something with his life. I mean, it's fun to look at it like that because you're right. There's always that, well, I know this person. It's like, hey, you know what? Statistically, this many people got a side effect from this.
Yes.
I took it and I'm fine.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
There are some, again, there comes down to a lot of factors, but we need to look at even like different substances you can intake, foods. Most people can eat peanuts.
Sure.
But some people, if they even smell a peanut, they die.
That's wild. Yeah.
So you can't be like, well, peanuts kill you. No, they kill him.
Sure.
He just happens to have something in his body, and we're all individuals. Our bodies are individual. So I completely agree with the fact that we do focus on that.
Yeah. And, there's a time where you have to accommodate it. My point is simply that it shouldn't be it shouldn't be at the cost of the norm.
Yeah.
And I see that happening in a lot of different areas where it's kind of like you're sacrificing the sanity and well-being of the 98% because you're trying so hard and bending over backwards to accommodate the 2% to the detriment of everyone else. There's times where there's no conflict.
Yeah.
Right. So if it's like, oh, okay, I don't know, 1% of the population is in a wheelchair or can't walk or something, and someone's like, yeah, we should put in a wheelchair ramp. Totally fine.
Yep.
The problem is with like the sort of more woke mentality is that no, we need to like get rid of the stairs.
Completely
like
get rid of stairs.
Right. It's like oh
All
no, some
ramps.
people are disabled, so yeah, all ramps, like get rid of the stairs. It's like no, we can have the stairs and the ramp. Like why are we blowing up the thing? You see what I mean? It's that's kind of their mentality with so many things, and it's just like this is not a way to structure a society. You need to be able to accommodate the exceptions in reasonable cases. There's limits to this. But I don't know. We're just in this strange place, I think, particularly in the West, where simultaneously, by many measures, things are as good as they've ever been.
Better.
And by many measures, we're in the best position ever. But by other measures, for example, if you look at health, we're in by certain measures, some aspects of health, both mental health and physical health, are worse than they've ever been in recorded history.
90+% of Americans are metabolically suboptimal. They're not metabolically functional.
Yes.
So when you look at what's going on, the biggest existential threat to America is our health.
Yes, agreed.
People are on 9+ prescription medications after a certain age. You have a situation where people are taking one pill to counteract the other pill, to counteract the other pill. Obesity is going to be over 50%.
That's wild.
Most people are over, I think it's 70+% overweight.
Yep.
We're going to be, so the last statistics were in 2019. We don't have the actual data from after 2020 when people were locked in their houses, getting Grubhub delivered every minute, right? So we're in a situation where America is fatter than ever, sicker than ever, and we're wondering why all these measures are going through the roof, right? Cancer is up, and heart disease is up.
And mentally too.
Mentally, I think mentally, a lot of things goes back to the father thing.
Yeah.
I think that if you have a solid paternal figure to guide you into how to deal with situations, then I think you'll be in a better place. I think those kind of tie together.
For sure. But that number is also at the worst it's ever been.
But if you're not physically healthy, you're not going to be optimized mentally.
Yep.
So if you're physically unhealthy, you're metabolically unfit, and your body, you're not getting enough blood to your brain, your body's just not functioning. We see all the data, exercise, weight training actually increases your cognitive abilities. So when you have a nation of lazy, sedentary people who can't stay awake because they're so sick, and yes, being fat is being sick.
Yes.
You can't be fat and be healthy at the same time. Remember Cosmo's cover with the fat chick? Like, hey, this is the new healthy. No, it's not. You can't be fat and healthy at the same time. It's not possible. You could be fat and feel good.
Sure.
But that's relative. Imagine how good you'd feel if you weren't fat.
Yes.
So we need to address that. But unfortunately, fat acceptance came in. So all of a sudden, when I say, hey, I think people should lose weight, you're a racist. I'm like, how does that even make sense? How does that doesn't make sense.
Have you observed that it's only targeted at women?
The fat thing?
Yeah.
I have
the fat acceptance and body positivity thing.
That is, but I do think that if any group has no excuse to be fat, it's men.
Sure, I agree.
Because we hormonally are in an advantage over females. We also don't have the issues with post-pregnancy weight, a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, it comes down to consuming too many calories.
Yes.
You can go to keto and this, that, carbohydrate, doesn't matter. In any setting, in all meta-analysis of studies, if you're in a hypocaloric state, calories don't matter. No, they do. They do. So whether you're eating all meat, all veggies.
How could they not? Like it's wild to me when this is one of those subjects where, nutrition can be complicated. But on a basic level, it's like, bro, like the simple laws of physics, I don't get why people overcomplicate it to so much. I can understand someone saying like not all calories are created equal.
Yeah.
Sure, that makes sense. And there are certain things that are going to make it more likely or less likely that you over or under consume calories. There's lots of factors at play. But when people say that calories don't matter, I'm just like, because how are you going to have over 70% of the population overweight or obese, over 40% obese, and your message to them, which you think is going to help them, is to tell them that calories don't
just
matter.
Cut out seed oils. So here's why food matters, right? Here's why. Because the calorically dense foods are the ultra processed foods. That's where you're getting calories. They're also not as satiating. The food signaling is way different between the two. Nutrient density are way different. So if you eat, let's say a Pop-Tart, which I believe is 70 grams of carbohydrate, versus an 8-ounce sweet potato, which I believe is about 60 grams of carbohydrate, your satiation levels are going to be much different because you have the fiber. It's also packed with nutrients, 600 plus milligrams of potassium in a sweet potato alone. So that's the difference. Food quality does matter. Again, remember the old shop the perimeter of the supermarket? Yeah. If you do that, you'll be just fine. And the reason diets like the carnivore diet work is you can only eat so much steak. Like I don't nibble a ribeye like I can nibble a potato chip. It's also cutting out snacking.
Yep.
And that's why intermittent fasting works for so many people, because let's say you're doing a 16-hour fast, 8-hour window, or 18.4, or 18.6 or 16.8. You're taking out like 5 hours of time you could have messed up on your diet.
Yep.
So it's simple caloric restriction. In the lean gain study they did, it was fascinating because they had slightly greater weight loss in the fasting study. And I read through the study, and I remember the fasting people are posting this, and I read the actual study, which no one does. They just read the conclusion, right? Yep. The lean gains participant ate an average of 250 calories less than the non-fasting group per day.
Yeah.
That explains it.
There you go.
Even mathematically, it explains it because think about it, 250 times 7, and you're doing that every week.
Every week, yeah.
That's a caloric deficit that's going to lead to a reduction in fat. So they lost more weight. So when you look at the data, it's pretty simple. Don't eat too much. And if you focus on whole natural foods, you won't just get more nutrients and be healthier, because weight loss is one thing. It's probably the main thing, but you also want to make sure you're not in a nutrient deficit.
Absolutely.
Where you're getting the adequate nutrients. So that's why eating a Twinkie versus having let's say a chicken breast and a potato, completely different. For the same amount of calories, you can eat much more food and get much more satiated, so your opportunity to overeat is much lower.
Have you noticed how bodybuilders, us meatheads, quote unquote, are quite literally 15 to 25 years ahead of
We've always been
the science? I find that hilarious.
Well, keto was... See, the thing is, so Dr. Atkins came out with keto in the 70s.
Yes.
And it's a way to, treat seizures. That's what it was mainly for. If you cut carbohydrate, you cut seizures. It's pretty fascinating. But bodybuilders have been cutting carbohydrate for years because it's the only thing. You don't want to lower your protein. You want a gram per pound of body weight. That's what we've been going for that since ISSN finally came out with their statement. That's like, hey, a gram per pound of total body weight, not lean body mass, total body weight. Aim for it. So even if you weigh 400 pounds, aim for it. Why? Because if you're eating all that protein, you're much less likely to get other crap in. So if you just know you need to get 400 grams, let's say you're a 400-pound dude, you're going to be full.
Yep.
You're not eating Cheetos. You're just not. So bodybuilders adapted low carbohydrate diet because there's essential amino acids and essential fatty acids. There's no essential carbohydrate. We've known this for years. So what we do is it's like, man, I'm stuck. I need to get leaner. Well, I'm ready to eat. I get my protein as low as I want to go. I need some fat for just functioning and hormones and all that. I think I'll cut the carbohydrate.
Yep.
So we naturally went towards lower carbohydrate diet because as you get, and bodybuilders get much leaner than most people need to. Most people probably don't need to worry about it to this degree. But what happened is we just started cutting carbs. Instead of having a cup of rice, we had 3/4 of a cup. And then we stopped losing that. We'd cut it down to half a cup. Next thing you know, you're just eating chicken and some fat.
Yep.
And that's how low carbohydrate diet kind of entered into the bodybuilding world. It was just a natural progression, and then studies kind of followed us.
Do you know one of the greatest, there's a lot of great psyops that I think have run over the decades, but one of the big ones that no one sort of acknowledges or brings up is and it's so pervasive because it's still in so many millions or billions of people's brains underlying. And this is the idea that there's some type of inverse correlation between strength and muscle mass and intelligence and intellect.
Yes.
Think of how heavily that stereotype through TV, movies, cartoons, just so much programming, right? You always have the big dumb the buff strong guy who's stupid or is a bully, right? And then the skinny guy is the smart one, and it's been so rigid. You see it all the time. People think there's some sort of that if you're like really into working out and particularly strength training, that somehow like has a negative impact on your brain. And that
it's the complete opposite.
Yeah.
So every day, just today, I was debating somebody on something completely unrelated, and I said something that was counter to what they said, and they're like, "Oh, just go take more steroids." I'm like, "Okay, I'll take more steroids, but that no problem. I'll take more steroids, but can we get to the like point of this, which had nothing to do with steroids, nothing to do with muscle, but that's always their go-to, and that and insulting the size of my penis." Which, by the way, for the viewers here, so steroids do not atrophy the penis. They atrophy the testicles because your testicles no longer have to produce.
Yes.
But nonetheless, and I always see that, look, it's all about relativity. Like if you have small legs, it's going to look bigger. So I'm just going to stop training legs and take a bunch of steroids. Just it'll look huge. So, but that's their go-to is, oh, you have a small penis because you're on steroids. I'm like, okay, but we were talking about clean water and Flint. I have no idea how that has to do with me abusing steroids, which I don't, but that's okay, fine, I do. I take everything. I must look amazing. The stuff that Twitter says I'm on, I'd be much bigger. Like I'd be much bigger. It's so astounding that they do use it against you. Oh, you're just a meathead. It's like, well, you can't see your junk. Like you are obese, you are metabolically unhealthy, but what are you going to do? Like it's just you just have to kind of roll with it. You get sick. I've seen you get like, oh, you're just a meathead. It's like so you're basically.
Oh, I've never touched a PED in my life, so I love being accused of using steroids.
It's the best compliment.
That's the best compliment as a lifelong natural. That's the best compliment.
Nothing makes me mad online anymore. You can say whatever. I'm like, yeah, okay, fine. And it's amazing how that stereotype is pervasive.
It is.
Because if you look at CEOs, they actually work out more than the average person.
Of course they do.
And they value their health. So what am I supposed to do to exercise? Am I supposed to do jazzercise? Like, what do they want me? Am I supposed to jog? Like, give me an activity. I lift weights. I'm genetically, we talked about genetics before, I posted a picture yesterday of me at 23 with my wife. Yeah. I was jacked. Yeah. Never touched a PED in my life. Jacked, relatively speaking, right? Compared to the average American. I go to the gym before work. I'm done with it's not like I spend all day in the gym. I was in the gym.
That's another huge misconception.
I was done at 7:30 a.m. in the office before anyone in any of my companies. Yep. Even with different time zones, from the East Coast to the West Coast, I beat everyone to the office. Already had my full workout. I go on with my day. Yep. Like I don't live in the gym. It takes like 45 minutes.
That's
it's
another
not
one.
that big of a deal.
People are like, oh, you must spend 4 hours. I don't have the
time.
I don't have time to spend 4 hours a day in the gym. I'm like, bro, what is anyone doing in the gym for 4 hours?
What are you doing for 2?
You can't even train hard for that long.
I'll give you 45 good minutes, okay? Yeah. I'll give you 45 good minutes, but they're focused, intense minutes. I get there, it's just like work. Yep. You don't go in the office just like, I'm gonna just surf the internet. No, you're like, okay, I gotta get these follow-ups done, boom. Gotta get these reports done, boom. I got a conference call at 1 p.m., boom, I'm done. That's how you go to the office. You go to the gym with the same mindset.
That's how you go to the office, but that's not how most people do.
Most people, I believe the last statistic, most people who work 8-hour days work about an hour and a half, I believe it was.
That sounds about right.
It's about right. They're chatting, they're doing this thing, they're surfing, they're buying things off Amazon. Nobody actually works. So if you go to the office, I can get my work done focused in 2 hours a day, the necessary work. But that just keeps me where I'm at. If you want to grow, if you want to elevate, and I'm talking about office jobs, but that also works for the, blue collar warehouse office. I've done the jobs, I worked in a feed store before. I've done that stuff. I was always the one who was there before and after everybody. I took as much overtime as I could because that's how you move ahead in life. When I got my first job at Weeder Publications, first week I'm there and I'm 19 years old. Okay. First week I'm there, I went in at like 6 a.m. I noticed that the first person got there at about 6:55. And my boss, who was Hawaiian, so he was on Hawaiian time all the time, he would come in at 11 a.m. but stay till about 7:15. So I'd always come to the office at 6. I'd get to my desk at 6:45 a.m. and I wouldn't leave till he left. So I made sure I was the first one there and the last one to leave, and I made sure I stayed busy the entire time. If I was done with my regular job, I'd do prospecting. And that's why I grew a territory worth $30,000 into a $3 million territory within a year. Because it's not that hard to do. You have to work. You have to work. Life is about meritocracy. Life is about outworking your opponents, whether it's sports or the office. If you go to the office like, I'm just going to do my job. I'm just going to do it. And that's cool. Like Bill Belichick, the coach of the Patriots, the former coach of the Patriots said, just do your job and we'll win. Just do your job, do your job, do your job. That's great. I don't want to just win. I want to dominate. I want to keep winning. So I don't just want to win the day. I want to win life. And to do that, you have to put in the work. You have to put in the hours. You have to put in the focus. And a lot of people just don't understand that because they were told to begin, well, it's okay for second place.
The truth is, it's a rare personality type. You have a unique personality type.
Yeah, and it's hard to empathize with people who don't.
Yeah, that's part of it. So I have not run a personality test on you, but I can guarantee you're going to be ultra high in conscientiousness, ultra high in assertiveness, probably pretty darn low in agreeableness, and these are that combination. No, that combination. You're talking 2-3% of the population has that combination of traits.
I bet you they're all pretty successful.
Yeah, for sure. These are that's why you can run personality profiles and you can predict success. You can predict income and so on. Because when I started like learning more about personality models, it really helped me to just understand the world a lot better. Because you can also predict political beliefs off of them. So when you understand that a lot of people's political beliefs are just rooted in their baseline personality traits, it actually makes you a lot more empathetic and you kind of get less frustrated by things as well because you realize, okay, a lot of this is not just a function of arguments and belief systems and upbringing and this and this and this. It's just like, okay, if you are super high in openness and relatively low, say, in conscientiousness, maybe relatively high in neuroticism, high probability you're going to be liberal. You're going to be left leaning,
and you're going to have lower testosterone. They actually did a study on that.
Yeah, it's a factor.
Conservative men have significantly higher testosterone than Democrat men. So I can actually take this a step further and say how much of a person's political beliefs is environmental, meaning their hormonal status, meaning the microplastics and the lack of good food and the lack of protein, the lack of essential fats, the ultra processed diet. Yeah. So what would our societal outlook be, or the breakdown be, of conservative to Democrat men if men were all living healthy lives? And if you've ever been to a gym, I don't care if they're black, white, brown, yellow, you're going to be in a majority conservative place. Now, Cernovich does a great job breaking down that doesn't work for runners, but I can say that it's a different sport. Yeah, it's not a testosterone-driven sport. It's not strength-based. So if you go to a strength training gym, CrossFit, if you've ever been to a gym, they're the most based people you'll ever meet. I don't care if you're in Seattle. I don't care if you're in Nashville. You're going to have the most based people you'll ever meet. And the one thing they have, think about CrossFit. You're always trying to beat your time. You're always trying to beat your weight. You're always trying to beat the person next to you, get your name on the board. Okay, you're exercising. You're probably not fat. So you're likely to be more based. So I would say that it might not even be these men's fault. It might just be that they were raised in a household that gave them ultra processed foods where they didn't emphasize physical activity. They didn't play sports. Look at David Hogg. Dude's got 4-inch arms and he talks tough. That dude probably never played a sport.
Of course not.
He never did anything competitive. And so now he's the guy on the left. But then you look at the breakdown, like it just appeared when I first started. I always thought fitness when I was in the 90s in California, I thought it was like, oh, well, the free people, because at that time, Democrats were about freedom of speech. They were about no war. That's why I gravitated towards it.
Sure.
I want to say what I want to say, and I don't want to go to war.
Yeah.
That was my two main things. And it flipped, where now if you look at the Democrat National Convention and then you look at the Republican National Convention, there's a discernible difference in the way the men look.
It's flipped in a lot of ways
It
as
has
well.
flipped.
I heard that oh gosh, I don't want to state this incorrectly, but it's something like at this point. So you know how historically, and even people who haven't caught up yet, they view Republican as the party of big money and the rich people.
That's
kind
what
of
I
thing,
used to
right?
think.
It's flipped now. So it's now 70-30 in terms of I don't know if it's wealth or if it's income, but I think in terms of wealth, like 70%, gosh, I'm not going to state this correctly, but it's like a 70-30 split where the 30, it's like Trump, it's almost like Trump, something like Trump voters have like 30% of the wealth, whereas like Hillary or Kamala voters or Biden voters have like 70% of the wealth. So it's flipped. By the way, the same thing's happened in the UK.
Really?
Yes, where the Conservative Party has gone from being one that people thought is, oh, this is the rich people and big business and kind of like elitist. And, the Labour Party, that's the working class and that's the people and that's for, lower income and so on. And it's inverse now. So now where it's like, okay, now it's, the college educated and more affluent are now more likely in the UK to vote Labour. In the US, they're more likely to vote Democrat. And the more working class, salt of the earth, overall lower income type people are actually more likely to vote Conservative in the UK or Republican here in the US. And this shift has happened perhaps in the last 20 years or so.
Bring it back to hormones. What is the working class doing? They're working. What are the other people doing? They're sitting in an office desk with their friggin' lattes. They're just typing away. The men have become just sedentary women.
I mean, if you want to see the most obvious thing, I mean, what would the map look like if only women voted?
Oh, it would be, but then you look at the Democrat men voting.
I know.
The patterns of low testosterone men matches women.
Yes, I know. That's my point.
Basically that's, but it's come down to, like, they talk about this glass ceiling when women far outnumber men as college graduates. The glass ceiling look, man, did it used to happen? Yeah. Now I would say that men are actually at a disadvantage. To call women, to give women perks, is like, we're a woman-owned business. It's like, yeah, most businesses will be because you guys got all the degrees. The men are out there cleaning sewage tanks. So it's only natural if you look at the progression of the hormonal voting. If you look at the lines on the charts, they match evenly.
Yes.
The lower the testosterone, the more liberal the man.
Yes.
The higher the testosterone, the more based. I don't like to use the word. I don't consider myself a Republican. I don't want to associate with Mitch McConnell. That's not my guy.
But you could say conservative is a more accurate label than Republican, because the parties float around a lot.
I think I'm more libertarian, but I know libertarianism would never work in this country, and also libertarians don't even know what they are. Like, there's some libertarians are pro-life because anti-aggression, some who are pro-choice because of body autonomy, some who are more open border than any Democrats ever be. Who are you to tell me who I can and can't hire? It's like. So, I mean, Mises Caucus is probably more closely to what I am. They're basically libertarians with common sense.
Yeah. I think that's like, but the terms also get conflated because, so you can be politically libertarian and socially conservative.
Absolutely.
Right? So in terms of, and by the way, I think most people in the world are conservative. There are way more conservatives in the world than there are liberals and progressives. Most of the world is conservative. If you actually look at what people believe, how they run their family, how they see gender dynamics, their views about marriage and parenthood and all of these things, with their views on crime, their views on borders, whatever it is, most people are conservative. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are like, they vote for the right-wing party, because these things change a lot country to country, right? And even decade to decade. But just because these are the baseline things, we're using the word base again, right? These are the baseline things that work and that create a functioning family, society, individual, and so on, right? A lot of the most woke progressive ideas, they're just garbage ideas. They don't work. They don't function. You might think, oh, that sounds interesting intellectually, But if you actually implement it, I mean, we were touching on this a bit before. We were talking about drug legalization, for example,
yes.
right? From a libertarian or even a progressive standpoint, I can understand intellectually the argument that you should just legalize all drugs, right? Why should the government regulate what someone can intake into their body? Like I can empathize with that argument, but the reality is, if you run that experiment, I think didn't Portland just do this
and it failed miserably.
Yeah, and now they're rolling it back.
Yeah.
Because these things have downstream consequences. They do have negative externalities, right? That if you are walking down the street with your daughter or with your family, and you've got people who are injecting heroin or they're strung out on fentanyl or whatever it is, and they're doing all the stuff that results from that, that has an impact on you.
Absolutely.
It has an impact on the neighborhood, has an impact on the community. So it's not as simple. It's not, you can't oversimplify it to just like, oh, that person's just doing themselves. Even with something like obesity, I feel is, because I'm from the UK, so we have the NHS. Yeah. So in a country where you have socialized healthcare, you can't even run the argument that someone being morbidly obese or smoking or overdosing on drugs, you can't even run the argument that it doesn't impact other people, because it quite literally and directly does, even financially.
Yes.
In the U.S., maybe you could argue that to some extent, but there's always an effect.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
I mean, because our healthcare costs go up, we have to subsidize, and also the medications, insurance, it raises everyone's insurance. Like, there's a huge issue with obesity. Huge, huge, huge issue. But back to the marijuana thing, it's crazy because it literally makes people stupid. And I've seen it. Like remember the stoners in high school?
Yes.
Actually,
no, I don't, because I was not in high school, but I remember in university.
I was in California, so there were a group of stoners, and now the football team, some of them partook in recreational drug use, right? I remember we're like, dude, those guys are losers. Yeah. Like, let's go play sports and get chicks. Like they were and they had their little group. They wore gothic stuff, and I was like, you guys are weird. Like, why are you always smoking weed? That's weird. And it just pervasively it entered culture. It entered the urban culture, and through hip hop music, it became romanticized. Smoking on some weed. I was just listening to Nate talking like, you got chronic, won't you light it up? You know that song. So I never realized it at the time, but they glamorize drinking in country music. Every country song, and I got drunk, my girlfriend left me. I'm like, dude,
Jack Daniels.
It's everywhere. Yeah. You cannot get away from these habits. And alcohol is romanticized, where you're expected to do it in college.
Yes.
If you don't do it, you're weird. Well, she's going to go get drunk. No, she's not. No, if you want to be a rebel, don't drink. Because drinking is everywhere. And parents, the worst are, soccer parents. They're the worst. They literally, like, as soon as the game's done at 12, they're drinking.
Yep.
They're drinking. They bring alcohol to the hotel lobby. As I've seen this firsthand as a parent, I'm like, what example are you setting for your child? So you're going to go and tell your kid, don't get drunk, when you're literally, and they talk about it like it's cool, like they're teenagers. Like, yeah, Mary, we're going to go get drunk. Like, gosh darn it.
I find it weird.
It's so weird. It's alternative universe.
And it's kind of, maybe it's weirder for me. I mean, I don't drink, and I haven't drunk since last time I drank was when I was 22. But I also grew up in a country where it was illegal.
Yeah.
So I think maybe I also just never had but I did go to boarding school in the UK from 11. So it's not like I wasn't exposed to it, but I don't know. I've just always been like, if someone wants to, okay, but not doing so is, as far as I'm concerned, certainly to excess. Like it's just a massive advantage. And, I think I've talked about this in previous podcasts, but I really think that this century, we are going to see just the greatest bifurcation in humanity ever.
Absolutely.
I get asked a lot, are you optimistic about the younger generations? And my view is like, I'm hyper optimistic for some of them. I'm optimistic about your kids.
They'll be fine.
They'll be more than fine.
They'll be good.
And it won't just be that they'll be fine. It's like there's another group of kids who are their exact same ages who are everything that from their physical health to their mental health to their screen usage to their drug and alcohol usage to the example that's being laid for them and the way they're being raised or not raised, that whole family dynamic situation, I'm hyper pessimistic about them because there are even more, there's always been pits to stumble into. But I would argue in some ways, perhaps now there's more than ever before with smartphones and with social media and with all of these tools. It's like there's a small percentage of people who are taking these tools and using it to run business, make money, create amazing connections, do this, create this.
I got my office right there on my phone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what percentage of people are using it as a net positive versus a net benefit? A net negative.
It's a dopamine thing.
Yeah.
It's just dopamine. They're scrolling TikTok. They're passively going through, wasting their mind share. And that's something, again, it's like, we don't need to ban TikTok. We just need to monitor what our children do.
Yeah.
Don't let your kid, we should ban it. Well, why don't you tell your kid
see,
not to use it?
This is a fantastic example because millions of kids barely have parents.
Bingo.
And so this comes back to what I was saying about the power and authority. If it's not going to come from the parents, this is what leads to increase. This is part of the reasons why governments grow and you get the nanny state, because it gets to a point where it's like, okay, well, if the family governance structure doesn't exist, is it a surprise that people look to the government to say, hey, you need to make some laws, you need to make some rules, right? In a healthy society, this is why in the past, when vast majority of people are all in, healthy, decently stable two-parent families, you don't need as much government.
None.
Because the power lies within the family. You don't need as many laws. If people have good morals and good ethics, you don't need as many laws, right? You're on a day-to-day level, the way we behave and the way that we interact and the way we treat people, I can guarantee it's not primarily based on what is legal and illegal in terms of the government laws. It's based on your moral code. It's based on your upbringing. It's based on your ethics. It can be based on your religion, your faith, this combination of things. But the more you gut those things out of people, the more you need the heavy hand to say, okay, you can't do this. You must do this. You must do this. It's like you need, just like if you had a child who is well grounded and has a solid sense of morality, you don't need to reprimand them. You can give them more autonomy.
Absolutely.
Right? You can, there will be children, say your daughter's age, 18, 18, right?
Yeah.
Who sending them off away from the family, that would be the worst thing that you they will, that's why people project that onto you. Do you see what I mean? That's why they say, she's not going to listen to you. She's going to be, because for their child, that might well be the case because they haven't raised them over that 18 years.
She calls me 4 times a day.
In the same way, yeah.
We have a great relationship. And again, we're friends, but at the end of the day, she respects me as a father. It's a contractual relationship. I'll do this for you, but you need to do this.
Yeah.
Nothing in life is unconditional. There's no such unconditional love. That's stupid. That's like saying, I unconditionally love him. Well, what if he beats you up?
Yeah.
Do you still love him? No, you might have feelings for, but there's no such thing as unconditional anything in life. So everything comes with conditions. So if I'm going to do this for you, you're going to bring it back. And that's the problem, is that going back is that you need to have in society, you need to have the family unit, or else the government becomes your God. That's also why we need a God. And that's why you see they say the left is a cult. A cult is a religious entity. It's a religious being. And that's because I think it's like 65 or something % of Democrats are atheists, of Democrat voters.
That would make sense.
So my question to you is, do you think that the government purposely has done things to break apart the nuclear family to gain more power?
I think yes. And I also think that, but I don't, I think people would like to think that it's all intentionally designed and planned because I think that actually gives people some type of comfort.
Yeah.
And we as human beings always like to be able to blame some type of entity for everything that's wrong. It's actually quite easy. It's actually how people can fall into certain types of bigotry where they want to blame everything on white people, blame everything on the Jews, blame everything on the blacks.
I blame it on the Jews personally.
Right? But that's how people fall into that because it's a very simplistic it's a very simplistic thing, and it's like, oh, okay, I've solved this problem. It's just that. I think the reality is that yes, there is absolutely malice and intention behind some of it, but also a lot of it is a culmination of things that were set forth, say, for example, in the 60s and the 70s in particular, which people did not expect the fallout to be the way that it was. So to give some real examples, let's talk about the introduction of birth control and the whole sexual revolution. Yeah. Okay, I'd say that's changed the world more than the atom bomb, because for millennia, sex, reproduction, and marriage have been heavily, heavily intertwined. You couldn't really get around it. Maybe people could debate the marriage one, but they kind of didn't societally and culturally. No matter where you are in the world,
you're right.
These three things, they're tied together: marriage, sex, parenthood. In the 1960s, across the world, starting in the West and then across the world, you split these things apart. And then what happens next? That you bring in birth control and then you legalize abortion and so on. So, and when they did this, when birth control was introduced, the number of unplanned pregnancies increased. Everyone thought it would decrease. They thought it would decrease. It's like, well, obviously, if there's access to birth control, hormonal birth control, condoms, and so on, they're like, well, obviously, that'll decrease the number of unplanned pregnancies. No, it went up because people's behavior changed. Then people are like, oh, okay, we can, and then you encourage it in the media. Hey, free love, all this stuff. People can go out, have sex with whoever, whatever. And so people's behavior changed. And now, 60 years later down the line, and we're looking at all of this, this of course, has an impact on the divorce rates. Boom, they shot up. They introduced
fatherless household.
Yes, the divorce rate shot up. Fatherlessness shot up. So now, men and women are just out. Men and women are going to have sex. The question is, what context are they going to do it in? What are going to be the expectations? What's going to be downstream of it? So all these conversations, the whole debate about abortion and so on, it's all rooted in these changes in the 1960s. And then, of course, and then you bring in certain welfare policies which create incentives for single motherhood, saying, hey, you're not going to get access to this money if there is a man in this household. Obviously, that devastated the black community in the U.S. in particular.
Bingo.
And then in 1971, you take the dollar completely off the gold standard. No, I don't believe any currency now around the world is on a gold standard. It's all just fiat currency. So if you look at the real wages and you look at things like house prices and you look at inflation and so on, it all went nuts just over 50 years ago, because now you can just keep printing. You didn't used to be able to just randomly print as much money as you want. Now it's just, okay, we can just do all this. And so I don't think in the 60s and the 70s, like, people all sat around a table and were like, this is our giant plan to destabilize all of these nations and the family dynamic and the economy in the 2000s. I don't think that's what they thought necessarily. Maybe a few people did, but it's just downstream. All of these things are happening. It's like, if you think now, okay, we are in 2024. So let's say, to round it out, sign up from 2020 onwards, all of the stuff that's happening now, between 2020 and let's say 2030, it's not going to be until 2050, 2060, 2070. It's going to be when your children are my age, the age you are now, that you're going to be able to accurately see, okay, what was the long-term result of that thing that they did back in 2024?
Yeah.
Right? It could be something to do with the border.
Yep.
Could be something to do with the border. Say, okay, we're going to have certain policy, we open border policies, and this happens. And you can see some immediate impacts, but it's like, okay, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, 60 years from now, what is going to be the impact of this? And this is where people don't think, because people have also been programmed into extraordinarily short-term thinking. And this is I believe this is one of the downsides of the way that the sort of democratic politics works, because the focus is always on the next 2 years or the next 4 years. The USA doesn't have a 20-year plan. It doesn't have a 50-year plan. It doesn't have a 100-year plan.
We don't have a one-year plan.
China does.
Yeah, China. Yeah. So that's when you look at. So here's my. There's a way I look at abortion. I don't like it.
No.
I don't like it at all. I think it's murder.
It's horrible.
However, who's getting the abortions? Probably not my kids. Probably not my neighbor's kids. It's mostly Democrats. Who's sterilizing their children? Who's promoting this? You can be whatever, cut off your thing, become a woman. If it continues at this pace, also conservatives are out reproducing Democrats by a lot. So I think it's something like 1.4 to 1, and that's still very significant.
Yes.
So when you look at things like that, in 20 or 30 years, the country is going to be majority Republican or conservative.
In theory, but in reality, this is not how things work out. Firstly, I mean, I get what you're saying. I'd say that's really dark because that would be like
very dark.
20 to 30 million children sacrificed for the sake
well,
of,
there's more
it's about 1 million a year.
There's more aborted babies in New York, aborted black babies in New York than there are
it's horrible,
born black babies.
It's about 1 million a year just in this country alone. So there's that. But then also, you know, why do you think they're going after the kids so hard in the schools and the universities? Because they're converting people, right? So yeah, there are conservative people, kids raised in conservative families who stay conservative. But then there's I don't know the numbers, but there's a significant chunk who, that's why there's the danger of that's why conservatives have this view of don't send your child to public school or to college, because it's like, I've met people who have been like, hey, you know, our daughter went to college and she did shift. Right. Right. I've spoken to people one-on-one who have this. And sometimes my question is like, oh, you know, in my brain, I do sort of think, well, you shouldn't have sent her to college then. Right. I think you do have to be really vigilant in a way that historically, I don't think people had to be, even with the schools.
Right. Go to school. I didn't even think about that.
They didn't need to think about it. Now it's like you've got over 5 million people homeschooling now. It used to be in the tens of thousands. And I think homeschooling is cool, but I think you have a massive problem when people are feeling like you need to homeschool, because if you don't, then
there are different areas, right? Williamson County schools are great.
Yeah,
they're great. I haven't had one complaint.
Good.
So you get occasional issues here and there, but you know, first week of college, my daughter sends me a screenshot. What are your pronouns? She's like, I'm gonna leave this blank. My name's Cammie. What do you think? You know, it's like, but yeah, I can understand that, but you need to find a way. We can't take this country back with carpenters and plumbers. Now we need to have them, but we can't keep all of our kids out of schools. Somebody has to go in those industries.
I agree.
So you got to send, like when you go to war, you got to prepare for it, right? You got to train for it. So that's what the 18 years of raising your children does. You have to prepare them to be individual, independent thinkers. You got to prepare them to be individuals. You got to prepare them to be strong and have their own code of ethics and morals. And I just don't think a lot of these parents are involved enough.
You know, it's hard. And I think this is what's tricky with these things is, and again, this is something that people have always historically understood, is one of the issues I think with the U.S. in particular is, you know, things are I'm thinking a lot about just how things are intergenerational. And you can always have someone who, better or worse, breaks away from the trend, right? You can have a family where for decades or even for centuries, they've been poor and they've been uneducated. And then, you know, there's the son who, he's the first one in the family to go to college and get a degree and boom, he becomes a massive success and so on. Most people end up repeating the patterns that were modeled to them. That's the reality of it. So, and we know this, it bears out statistically. This is why having a 2-parent family and having the father in the home and stuff is so important, because if I don't know, someone was born into a family and especially a community where almost none of the kids know their dads, right? Almost like there's no fathers around. People are just having kids out of wedlock, baby mothers, baby fathers, so on. And that is the norm. And that is what is modeled to someone for, say, 2 decades. Then by the time they're 20, in most cases, they're going to repeat that in some way, because you can't teach something you didn't learn. So I know a lot of the way that I am and the way that I see the world and just the way I am, so much of it is from my family. Thank God. My parents have been married for 48 years. Wow. I've got 4 older siblings. Everyone's successful. They're all married. And that's what was modeled to us. So I'm like, I'm going to go and do the same thing. I've seen it. I've seen it work. And then not just my parents, but dude, I'll tell you, I'm going to tell you something funny. I grew up in Saudi Arabia, in a community, and I will tell you just how functional and how much of a bubble this was. I didn't even know until I was about 9 years old I didn't even know that you could have children without being married. I'd never seen it.
Really?
Every single family where I grew up was intact.
And that's not a bad thing.
A mother, a father, 100%. Zero families without a mother. So I didn't even, do you know how I found out? You remember Maury Povich?
Yeah. Oh, no. Maury, you are not the father.
That's how I found out. I remember watching it as a kid and I was like, how can they not, like, isn't, the woman comes on.
How does this work?
I was like, surely the father is her husband. And I was like, and then of course, in school you learn the biology and stuff. And I was like, oh, wow. So that just shows. So
that's independent of that? Whoa.
Yeah. Because again, until you know the biology, it's like every single person I know and I have ever seen, and all of my family members, mother, father, children. So I didn't know the mechanism. I thought you get married and you wait some time and, a baby just comes. And then, you get older and wiser.
Pops out.
And then there's people by the millions who are growing up in the complete opposite. I've spoken to people who have never even, why don't they believe in marriage? Because they've never even seen it work. So can you blame someone who's quite literally never seen that situation even work out for being a bit skeptical and thinking, oh yeah, that institution is outdated, or it's not, or it's just not important, right? You can just go out there, sleep with women, that baby mother there, that, as long as you're giving them money. And
that's why if you look at it used to be like strippers, you used to always joke, oh, she has no dad.
Yes, of course.
You're usually correct.
Yeah.
The OnlyFans girls, it's like, I wonder what her dad thinks.
Exactly.
He doesn't know.
He's not there.
Nope, he's not there. So there's a decay of society and it's killing the women, and men are simps. Somebody's paying for these. The OnlyFans, I think it was, so I saw this stat yesterday. So I think it's like 9 billion versus 6 billion. The money made by all the OnlyFans girls versus NFL players. Yep. They are out earning NFL players, dude.
It's mental.
But without simps, that would not be possible. Problem is there's weak men and there's slut women. And how do the women become that way? It's their upbringing, the lack of father, the lack of a stable relationship. So like you said, well, you didn't know that you could have a baby out of marriage. They don't even know what a real relationship looks like. And that's why, despite my wife and I, we're human. Like, we've had marital issues.
Of course.
Went to counseling. But the reason we stayed together wasn't because of some divine calling from God, even though I'd love to say it is. And I'm really glad we fixed it, right? But it was because we did not want our children to grow up in a divided household.
Yes.
That's what kept us together. And because we learned that, we went to counseling, we've never had a better relationship. Good. Like, our relationship's perfect. But that's the thing, people give up easy. Now, there are times you need, like when your dude hits you, or when your wife is abusive.
The extremes.
The extremes. Yeah. But for the most part, people are like, oh, I just don't love him anymore. I just don't find him attractive. I'm going to buy a sex toy.
This is another fantastic example of what I call the obsession with exceptions, right? Because as soon as you say this, someone will be like, oh, well, what if the man is an alcoholic and he's beating her up and he's doing this and he's cheating? And you're like, dude, that is what percentage of what... In the U.S., the divorce rate is something around 50%.
It's 50.
Which is ludicrous.
It's insane.
That's insane, right? And I'm like, okay, of that 50%, how many are what you're describing here, right? Can we not just jump to the most extreme?
Well, it's the abortion argument, right? What if it's incest? I'm like, what is this, West Virginia? Yeah. I'm like, are we a country full of West Virginia? Sorry, West Virginia. Sorry, Tim Pool.
Shots fired.
Yeah, shots fired. Tim's going to be really mad. Like, hey. But no, here's the thing. You always go, well, what if you were, and my argument for abortion used to be rape. And then I realized it was less than 0.5% of, and I'm like, so, and you can't, if you made an exception for that, then you know how many false accusations of rape there'd be? So why are you getting an abortion? He raped me. Dude's like, what? Yeah. What? Like, there's already enough of that. And by the way, that should be like a friggin' very bad crime to falsely accuse someone of that. But it isn't. It isn't. They always just like that dude, that Bauer, the pitcher.
There've been a lot.
There's so many. That guy's career was ruined. One of the best pitchers would have been in the, but career ruined because this woman set him up.
Yeah.
And so I look at things from a broad spectrum, a broad lens when I look at these, societal issues. And you're right. It is, people don't understand, like, marriage, relationships, they're not easy.
No.
And honestly, it was my fault. Because I expected this fairy tale, even though my parents had a really dysfunctional relationship, they were together. But I'm like, we're going to do everything perfect and this, and then it's like not perfect. You're like, what's going on? what's going on, then you go to counseling. And look, man, I'll clown on counseling, but for us, just have someone there to force us to talk was great.
Good.
And most people could use it.
Yeah.
It's not, look, it's like $80 an hour. It's less than child support, fellas, let me tell you. So look, man, I'm not saying that there needs to be an end to divorce. I think there are situations, but for the most part, people have this unrealistic expectation of what marriage should be. And at the end of the day, marriage is two people settling. It's like, hey, cause settling down, like, you know what? I'm good with that. Yeah. Like, that's as good as I'm going to do. And then she's like, yeah, that's about as much as I'm going to do. And you're like, cool, let's get married. Yeah. I don't feel like playing around anymore. And that's marriage. Like, people expect this like divine love at first sight thing. And to think that at 16 years old, I had the same viewpoint of the world and the same mind. I was a 16-year-old thug who happened to be okay at football. You know, like, I was an idiot. I was the poor kid. She had a good family. So like, I'm not the same dude I was. Yes. We're completely different people. We're adults. 16 versus 44. Yeah. You really think you haven't evolved? So you can either grow together or grow apart, but both of those things take work. So from a relationship standpoint, you have to realize like your relationship is something that you need to foster, you need to care for. It's like growing, it's like a lawn, right? Like if you don't fertilize and keep it up, you're gonna have dead spots, then you gotta patch that dead spot. Then you move on until your lawn's perfect, pristine. My lawn is amazing, by the way. So you have to mow it, you have to care for it, you have to put the plants, you gotta do seasons. So there's things you need to do to make a marriage work. But I'm by no means a relationship expert.
Dude, look, statistically, the average marriage in the US lasts 8 years, which is, it hurts me to even say that.
Over triple that
right?
thing, man.
So, you know, you might not be a PhD or whatever in this subject, but ultimately anyone who has been married for decades and is happy and is having a functional, as far as I'm concerned, I'm like, yeah, those are the experts. Like those are like, cause that's real. This is experience. Yeah. You can read all of these books. I can pontificate myself. I haven't been married yet. Right. So I have ideas and I talk to a lot of people and I know many people who have been married for decades and who have very happy, successful marriages. And I'm always asking them for advice. I'm always trying to learn and so on. But for me, even at this point, it's still theory for me because I have not yet implemented it and done it to the point that I could go to a younger guy and be like, all right, man, this is how you have a great marriage. I can just tell you secondhand things that I've learned. But, you know, I've noticed a theme through a lot of things that we're saying. And this is that, you know, we increasingly live in a disposable culture.
Yes.
Where instead of trying to improve things and fix things, it's jumping to the next thing and let's try this and try that. It goes for everything. I heard that I think something like 90% of podcasts don't make it past the 4th episode.
Yeah, because you give up.
People give up.
Because your views suck.
So if you made it
at the beginning.
So if you're recording anyone out there, if you're on like your 6th episode or your 10th episode, you've already done better than 90% of people who have tried.
Well, it's very, because you expect to launch it and you're going to get all these views, right? Like my YouTube, the Tiger Fitness YouTube channel. Like I just recently started a new channel because the algorithm, and once you have all these subscribers, it's been around since 2009, right? Boom. So yeah, that's the channel. And so, you know, the first few videos, we had one hit off. It was but I mean, you know, you had to grow, and to get over those subscribers, it took us years and years and decades to grow to that. It's just a battle, and just going at that, like, you know, a lot of like my first company, like, you know, for a long time, nobody bought the product. It took just working and persevering. We were told like, hey, I don't think this Extend, which was our branch to meet us. People like, no one's ever going to buy that. I'm like, I believe it's going to work. Yeah. And I refuse to give up. Now, sometimes that's stupid. Right? Like if it's going on, you can't keep doing the same mistake twice and 3 times. But, you know, the reason that product hit is because I refused to give up. Good. I stuck to the mission and I went to it. And that's marriage. That's everything in life. It's everything. Have to keep going. You have to keep trying. You have to keep look, it's like pedaling a bicycle uphill on the highest gear where your feet are going and you're going really slow. You know, that's what life is. That's what business is. You have to keep pedaling. You have to keep going. And one day you might hit what's called a tipping point. A tipping point where all of a sudden, let's say your sales are, they're going flat. And all of a sudden, one day, boom, you grow 200%. You're like, what the hell just happened? Yeah. And that is a culmination of all the work you did over those days and weeks and months and years and decades. It all comes together, and just at once it hits. Yes. And it happens. There's actually a book called The Tipping Point.
Yes.
Fantastic read.
Malcolm Gladwell?
Yeah, Gladwell.
Yeah. Dude, that's how it works, man. That's how it works. And I think this is probably my favorite thing about strength training.
Yes.
Not just the physical and the cognitive and energy benefits, but if you get the same principles that apply to building a strong muscular physique, if you take that same mentality and you apply it to business, to relationships, to creative activities, to any other type of skill, learning an instrument, learning a language, you just use that same thing, discipline, consistency, overcoming plateaus, just that keep going mentality, having a plan, sticking to it, then, ignoring what people may say, then you can apply that to anything, and over the course of time, you will succeed. And I think that so many people just give up because I don't even think it's laziness per se. I think, funnily enough, a lot of it comes back to pride. Yeah. And I think it's interesting. I don't know why someone would have the expectation. Like, why would you even expect that you start a podcast and by episode 5, you're getting millions of listeners? Like, why would that even be someone's expectation? Why would you expect that you have a relationship, a friendship, a marriage, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is? Why would you expect that there's not going to be any challenges or difficulties, anything in life? Just being a human being, there's going to be challenges. There's going to be difficulties.
It's mindset.
Yeah.
I want a dopamine hit. I pick up my phone. I scroll TikTok. I want a coffee. I want to get a espresso shot and just jack my adrenals through I just go to I don't have to get out of my car. I go to Starbucks, drive through. It's a society that rewards you for not working hard. Things are too easy to get. Getting food back in the day, like the rush of catching a woolly mammoth or whatever the hell you're eating, right? Yeah. You got to go chase it down. Yeah, I got it. Then you get to reward yourself and eat. And I'll say this, being jacked is a cheat code.
Oh, for sure.
It has, now realize my businesses aren't all sport nutrition. Like I deal with large retailers, large partners, a lot of different things. Just being in the shape I am, not only when I walk into a room, look, man, it's down to primate stuff, right? What gorilla is going to be the alpha? Usually the biggest, strongest one. So people are mentally wired to pay more attention to you. And also in business, it's about differentiation. So by being they remember you. Oh, that was that bodybuilder. Yeah, I remember him. Yeah. Man, he knew his stuff. Like when I got up, I present the IRCE, which is Internet Retail Conference. I'm presenting alongside the guy who runs NASA, Dell Computers, and Steve Madden. It was us 4. And we had this huge room, big screens everywhere. And there's me standing next to these literal geniuses, right? And the reason I stood out, I wore a polo shirt like this one, and people hear you speak, they're like, they automatically think I'm stupid. And then I'm just spitting facts. And they're like, oh, wait a second. So being in shape, you don't have to be jacked. You don't have to be a pro bodybuilder. Being in shape in business is the cheat code because you will do better. Look, it's been shown that people in shape are more like get jobs than people are out of shape. I'm not saying that's fair. I'm saying that's just human nature. And also the ability to attract a mate. You're always looking for someone who genetically, women want someone who will provide them with a child who doesn't suck. We're wired for that. That's why, men on Tinder who are good looking do so much better. And I think Myron Fresh and Fit, Myron, he has that thing. He's like, women, they just, they're very picky and choosy, where men, they're just whatever. It breathes, cool, swipe right, and then it matches. So there's actually studies on that.
Yeah, I think women swipe right on somewhere between 2 to 4% of profiles, and for men it's about 50.
Yeah. So being in shape as a male or a female just gives you a leg up. Will it make you?
There's one more thing that you didn't mention. There's one more thing that you didn't mention, which is important, which is that it is it indicates other positive qualities.
Bingo.
Because to build a physique like yours, even if I just saw you, there's certain things I already know about you. I already know that meant he must be disciplined. At least in the gym, right? And probably other, but you must be disciplined. You must be able to stick to a plan. You must be able to work hard, exert a lot of effort. Like you can't, because without that, you cannot build that type of physique. So it indicates something that it telegraphs something immediately. And that's one thing I love, in particular with strength training, because someone could be, you could be a great marathon runner or something, but it's less visible. So you could just be, oh, that guy's just a skinny guy. Maybe he's in like super incredible shape, but you've got to go to that extra step to find out. If I find out someone is a marathon runner, then that also tells me something.
Mad respect.
Yeah, it also tells me something about them,
respect.
but it's not quite as immediately visible.
And your appearance does matter.
Of course.
Even if, it does matter. So, like I always say, if you look at how we present ourselves today, unless I'm coaching, I'm always dressed nicely. I'm always wearing a nice pair of shorts or pants. I'm always wearing a nice shirt. I always got clean shoes on, even if they're athletic shoes. And you got to present how you want people to perceive you.
Yes.
So what do? Well, I understand I'm in decent shape, so I want to show that. So yeah, I'm wearing a shirt that's tighter. I can go a size higher. They make XXX at Lulu, right? I'm wearing shorts that fit. Yeah. I'm wearing, not the great, but I'm wearing clean pair of Hokas. So what do you want people to think when they see you? I always make sure I'm groomed. I got my hair cut, got my beard trimmed. So if you go out there with a neck beard and sloppy hair and you're wearing just whatever, you're wearing just sloppy clothes, you're going to look sloppy. So you have to put forth what you want people to think about you. And I know that sounds materialistic. Oh, you're vain, you're this, you're narcissistic. No. I want people to get that impression of me that I care.
Yes.
That I can take care of myself so I can take care of your business. So I will take care of your account if you bring on my product. That I'm going to take the same care that I do with myself with the project we're doing together. So you want to exude that. And that's what I try to tell people. You have all these manosphere guys like, you got to do, it's like, dude, just put forth what you want. If you want to be known as a slob, look like a slob. But if you want to be known as someone who's professional, who's well kept, who has his stuff together, then you probably want to exude that with your appearance, how you dress, how you look, because that's what people see. I don't care if you're 4 foot taller. You can't control that. No. Like I can't control that I'm 5'7". I can't grow taller, but I can get more fit. So that's how I look at things, and that's why you need to pay attention to that.
Do you know what's interesting about when people push back against those type of statements is they themselves don't believe their own pushback. And I'll tell you how I know. I'm always paying attention to like what people say versus what they do. And so someone will say that, oh no, that's not true, or, nobody judges based on appearance, or it's not that important or whatever. And it's like, okay, if you've got a job interview, how are you dressing? Yeah. Are you just going to roll out of bed and go in your PJ? Of course not. The same person saying that.
Everything you do is a job interview.
Yes.
Even if you're just talking to someone, everything's a job interview. You're always making new relationships. Yeah. It's a world interview. It's a societal interview. Everything from, even like my watch, functional. It's an Apple Watch. That costs a little bit of money, but he's not really concerned about that. He's more concerned with function. Wedding band. It's literally a band bell, like lifting ring. It's made out of silicone. Oh, well, he probably has a real wedding band, but he likes to do things. He doesn't like things getting in his way. So everything that I curate is intentional. Everything is intentional that I do. And that's how you need to look at life. You need to curate that. I think it was Steve Jobs had the same shirt.
Yes.
Because he didn't want to put in, but what was his shirt? It was black. It was simple. It was still nice. He looked put together, but you always knew what to expect from Steve. You always knew what to expect. He was consistent. He was regimented, right? So those are things you need to look at. What qualities do you want to exude to everybody who you interact with?
Amen. Marc, what's next for you?
Man, we have a lot of growth coming. Ambrosia, which is my company, you got to Planta. It's the number 1 selling plant protein at Vitamin Shop. That's grown crazy. Growing a lot of new retailers at all 408 Sprouts locations across the country. That's growing. We just launched the Planta bar, which I gave you a sample of. Enjoy it.
Awesome. I'll check it out.
Delicious. Tigerfitness.com. Going to keep growing that. Would appreciate everybody, supporting us there because it's an awesome site. We have awesome products. Also, the Outright bar is doing its thing. There's a lot of other things.
I love seeing those everywhere, by the way. Whenever I'm in the States.
Yeah, it's fun.
Whenever I'm in the States and I'm like traveling to it, I always feel a sense of pride, the good pride, when I see a product created by somebody I personally know. Like if I see a friend's book in a bookstore, or I see your Outright bars in I'll be in a gas station.
I know that guy.
Exactly. I love that.
How do you think I feel seeing it?
I love that.
I'll
awesome.
literally buy one. I'll buy one. Like I didn't send it to them. Yeah, we have just so much things in the fire right now. You know, with Legacy at Carbon, we just keep, you know, getting more athletes better and better and better. We got a couple kids who committed to D1 schools this year. It's really awesome. But other than that, you know, my daughter and my kids, you know, I'm coaching my son's football team. We have a game tomorrow, so hopefully that goes well.
Good luck with it.
Yeah, and we were 3-0 so far this year, so hopefully we extend that streak and playing a really tough team. My daughter's in college. My son has his wrestling season coming up, so that's going to be amazing. I can't wait. He did everything right, everything you asked him to. Training, mat time, he's getting like 3 hours of mat time a day. Like, wow. It's crazy. Weight training 5 days a week, so he's doing the work, and hopefully we can see a nice little state title. He's only one of my kids who hasn't won a state title.
No pressure.
Well, actually, you could count. He did win the Chicago Cup on a soccer team, so I guess we could count that.
Nice.
But yeah, so it's good, man. And honestly, just working every day. If there's new projects that come up, I take them.
Awesome.
Because, you know, there's 24 hours in a day, and I'm still sleeping a little bit. We could take away from that if we have to.
Nice one, Marc. Dude, you're a super inspirational, motivational guy, man. Always have been.
Likewise.
And God bless you, man.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.